I became a scientist because of magic. So as a kid I got into magic, and then one day I read a magic book and it said magicians are essentially psychologists. They're going out and doing experiments every day, and those are the magic tricks. And you really hope as a magician that your tricks work, that your experiments are successful, and they need to work on pretty much everyone all of the time. And I thought that's a very odd way of looking at magic, and I realised it was the case, and that in order to be a magician you have to understand about psychology, where people are looking and how they're thinking and so on. And that's how I got into psychology. So all those years ago you couldn't do an A-level in it, so I went straight from doing A-levels in maths and physics and chemistry to doing psychology at University College London. So it was a bit of a strange journey, but got there in the end. I don't think so. I think in a sense it's the opposite. The magicians have to be able to connect with an audience. That's what they do for a living, fundamentally. And I think if you're into the public understanding of science, public understanding of psychology, that's what you need to do. You need to connect with people. If you're not grabbing their attention, if you're not holding on to it, then you're not getting your message across. And so actually I do use skills as a performer and as a magician in order to design experiments the public will be interested in, or make a YouTube video that hopefully they'll watch. So actually I think it's a really helpful skill set. Magic isn't very much about secrecy. The actual methods of a particular trick, magicians tend not to share for all sorts of reasons, but fundamentally it's about communication, which is the same as public understanding of science. I think that at the moment within psychology we are drifting towards this notion of genes create brains and brains create people, and that's kind of it. You are your brain. And I'm very anti that idea. I think to some extent it is true. If you look at pretty much every aspect of personality or intelligence, creativity, to some extent, yes, it's predetermined. To some extent it is genetic. But to me that isn't very interesting, because that's the bit of you can't change. And actually for any of those topics there's a much larger extent which is determined by the way you behave, the environment you put yourself in, the people you surround yourself with. And that's the bit that interests me as a psychologist, because it's open to change. It means that you can make people more creative or more intelligent or change their personality by understanding the much larger social context. And so there are certain situations you put people in where they suddenly become a lot more caring, or a lot less caring, or they behave in a more extroverted way or a more introverted way. And so for me it's a much bigger systems view. It's much more complex, it's much more messy, much messier. But that's the context in which we need to understand people, not see them as these unchangeable things, because if you believe that, you start to act as if that's true, and I think that can be quite damaging. In general, I think if we tell people that they are not open to change, it leads to a very fatalistic viewpoint. So if you tell kids that actually their intelligence is set, and they are either bright or they're not so bright, or somewhere on that scale, and they believe that, then if you're a very bright kid, you may not put yourself in a challenging situation because you think, well, if I'm going to fail, it's going to reflect very badly on me, there's nothing I can do about that. If you're not so bright, well, you're going to avoid those situations, and when you fail, you think, well, there's nothing I can do to change that. Where if you tell people, actually, you can change, you are a flexible person, then when it comes to healthy behaviours, sort of activity, or not smoking so much, or eating more healthily, or whatever, that's a much more positive message. It says, this is where you are now, but maybe in a year's time, you will be in a better place. Because otherwise, you're encouraging a fatalistic worldview, where it says, actually, you're a smoker, and there's nothing you can do about that. It's somehow in your genes. Look, your parents were as well. And as soon as people believe that, they start believing as if it's true, and then it becomes true. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So for me, it would be adopting a much more open, flexible approach to human behaviour, which is to say to people, look, you're not the same person now as you were a year ago or 5 years ago. You got into what might be a difficult, dark place, but you can get out of it in the same way as you weren't there a few years ago. So it's adopting a much more open view, I think, of human behaviour. I mean, the problem with adopting a more sort of open view is that it's actually messy and complicated. It's rather nice to go, you know what, we can line everyone up on a continuum. And there's the healthy behaviours down here and the unhealthy ones there, and that's pretty much how it is. It's very simple to look at people like that. It's much harder to go, what kind of situations, what kind of cultures, what kind of messages actually work and change people. And particularly when you're dealing with change, which is difficult, as most health-related change is, and change that sticks. I mean, we all know we can change our behaviour for 24 hours. You try changing it over, the much longer haul, and that really does become challenging. So I think understanding the kind of complex interplay between people's brains, between the social side of things, the cultural side, is a challenge. And then understanding how you shift that is an even bigger challenge. It's why people tend to pull away from that worldview, I think. I probably don't have a favourite magic trick per se, but my favourite performance of a magic trick was actually the reason I got into magic, which was my grandfather. I used to visit him on the weekends, and he did this trick where I'd write my initials on a coin, and he'd make it apparently disappear, and then it would appear in a box that had some elastic bands around it. And it's a really good trick. I've since found out how it's performed. It's really good. He did it very well. And every week I would ask him, how's this trick done? He'd never tell me. He said, oh, magicians never let their secrets go. And then one week he said this very sort of intelligent thing, which was that he said, actually, I'll tell you where the answer is. The answer is in the library, but I'm not going to tell you what book it's in. And so that encouraged me to go to the library, to read around, and of course in trying to find the answer to that trick, I found out all about magic and so on. That set me on the course of magic psychology and academia and so on. So looking back, that's probably my favourite performance of a trick. I think only in the sense of change. Some of my work has looked at change in terms of psychology of luck and how you change people's attitudes and behaviours. And when I started that work, which was 15 years ago, there was this notion that change was very difficult. And I think what we've learnt over time is that actually, that's basically the whole nudge movement, is that small changes can have a very large impact on people's behaviour. And so I think, to me, there's some optimism that if you get it right, if you understand how the mind works, change isn't that challenging. But you have to understand how people function, and lots of our intuitions about that are just wrong. We're not born with a manual. And so you think, okay, we'll pay people not to smoke, so those sorts of ideas, that'll be fine. We'll pay kids to do homework, and suddenly you'll find out they will do homework. And of course we know that sort of thing simply doesn't work now. So I think it's about understanding psychology, but I'm optimistic about the future, because I've seen time and again that once you understand how the mind works, very small changes to people's thinking and behaviour can have really quite a large impact. So yeah, I'm optimistic about the future.